Pharmacy Residency Podcast, a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. I'm excited to talk to you today about how hard it is to get a residency. Now, you may have been told your chances are about 1 in 2. Or maybe they've said they're a little bit higher, the match rates are a little bit over 60%. And I wanted to show you exactly what you really need to know, which is how hard is it to get into the residency that you're applying to. And the easiest way to do that, and it's just like really one of the kind of most tried and true statistics, which is, your success financially really depends more on your zip code than anything else. And it's the same thing with residency. Which school of pharmacy you went to and how those relationships relate to the site are more important really than anything else. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the data from last year's residency match and what you should be looking at. So there's 3 different things that we're going to kind of break down, which is first, what is the success that a student has in getting an interview? Second, what is the success that they have after that interview and actually matching, which is what most people traditionally call the match rate. And I'm going to kind of explain why that's a little bit misleading. It could be a little bit higher or a little bit lower, or a lot higher or a lot lower than you really think. And then third, how to figure out how to determine whether this is a site you should apply to as really something to count on, because most residency matches will be with your first, second, third, generally, maybe fourth, maybe fifth, but is really unusual after you've gotten your interviews that you get the site that you've ranked outside of the first 5. So this is not your applications, this is the ranking once we get to that point. But let's take a look at how you should be looking at the data, because the data is given to you alphabetically. And then I'll tell you what I did to manipulate the data so that we can get what are your chances of an interview, what are your chances of matching to the site after the interview, and then how does the site deal with the actual schools themselves. And you're going to see a way that you can really, really see how different residency sites are. And really, it's kind of funny, but it's evidence-based. Like, the evidence is from last year, and that is hopefully a great predictor of whether you'll match or not. And hopefully I can save you some heartache from counting on certain residencies when really, you could do the data in March, and that's not when we want to do this, and look back and say, oh, wow, this was not a good fit for me in terms of where I came from, which school I'm at, and who they take. So let's take a look at the data. Okay, first let's talk really quick about the LOI makeover. Just a reminder that if you need help with your letter of intent, I can help you. Turnaround is usually 2 or 3 days. It's $95 for 2. I raised my prices a little bit just because I'm really trying to actually slow things down. I'm getting so much interest that I really want to make sure I can help everybody. So hopefully this will reduce the number of people that I get. But I'm probably going to stop taking people over the next week or so. It's just, it's a lot to do, and I spend a lot of time on them, and I really kind of get emotionally into it too. Like I'm rooting for them, and I want them to do the best they can. So if you want that, just make sure you go to residency.teachable.com/P/extreme LOI. Okay. All right, so what you might have done is you might have looked and gone into, for example, the American Journal of Pharmaceutical Education, even gone back to the issues like what are the things that somebody who matches does, and you can go into those articles and things like that. But I'm going to show you something really cool, and you're going to be able to do this for every site that you're going to. And you could also do it for example, if you're doing like a special PGY2 and you're trying to go from PGY1 to PGY2, what you could do is you could sample all of the PGY2s that you're applying to, and there's probably only going to be 1 or 2 of them at each one, and look at the numbers there to kind of get an idea of how hard is it to match in that particular specialty. So PGY2 is especially hard after that first onslaught of the early decision. It's not called early decision, but where they kind of keep their own. Okay, and I'll remember what the word is, later on. All right, so let's first look at what data we have out there. This is the alphabetical listing of the match rates from last year by College of Pharmacy. So Auburn isn't first because it had the highest match rate, though it does have a good match rate. It's because it's in Alabama, and Alabama is alphabetically the first state. And so the two Alabama ones go together, the two Arkansas ones go together, the two Arizona ones go together, and so forth. But this is a little bit confusing for students. Like, well, shouldn't there just be one match rate? Shouldn't there, And what this really is so registered means everybody that was interested in getting a residency at the very beginning. Active with the list means probably, and this isn't always the case because there's so few that actually write back. There's a huge number of these that, this gap, like where are the other 9, where are the other 9 people? The expectation is that the other 9 people weren't active with the list because they didn't get an interview, any interviews. Okay, but you can see that, at Auburn, 56 of the 65 did get an interview. Okay, so that's kind of the first thing you want to look at is, did your school, what are the chances of someone from your school getting an interview? Okay, and this is really what that number is telling you. Now, when you go look at the actual data, it's going to say something like did not respond 40%. Well, if you didn't get a single interview, the last thing you're doing is answering your email. You're just like, I don't even want to, it's not a thing for me. Just not even going to look at it. I'm just going to go get a job, do my thing. Okay. But the match rate is actually the number of those people. So 38 out of the 56 is what the match rate comes from. And then 18, unfortunately, didn't match. And this is phase 1 and phase 2 combined. Okay. So their match rate is 67%, okay, but 86% got the interview. And I feel like as a school of pharmacy, this is really your number one job, is to get them to that interview. If you can't get, 80% or more of your students to an interview, I feel like that's kind of a fail. And that's just my own personal opinion. But I think that you really should be above 80%. 4 out of 5 should get an interview. And then in terms of matching, of those, 67.86% of those that matched were the ones that got those interviews. Okay, so 2 out of 3. And that's that's a bit higher than the average, actually. But the number you really care about most is, of all the people that wanted a residency, how many got it? And more than 1 out of 2, 58% at Auburn got that. And that's a big deal. That's pretty good. But you can see that number varies greatly. You've got a 36 down here, 29, and then you've got higher numbers like a 79 up here, like UCSF, which is just crazy numbers. So that's kind of the first thing, but this isn't really useful to us. What we want to do is we want to rank them, and we want to know, like, where do I stand? So I'm going to keep it at the top of the sheet to keep things above board, no pun intended. But what we want to see is, of those that were interviewed, what schools have the best interview rate? And it's going to maybe surprise you that the big hitters that you would think about maybe aren't the ones that got these, but it's MCPHS in Manchester, New Hampshire, which registered 2, and 2 got interviews. And these are 100%, right? University of Minnesota, Duluth, 100% of the University of Minnesota, Duluth applicants got an interview, were active with the list, okay? Toro, and active with the list could also mean, I guess, if you didn't get an interview in 1, you still went in for phase 2. Toro, New York College of Pharmacy, 22 out of 22. Marshall, 26 out of 27. Pitt, 63 out of 66. And you might say, oh, wow, those are, the very top schools. But I think what this really does is says, you got an interview. Okay. And then, UNC's down here at number 10. Don't worry. It's still up there and all that. But this is kind of the first thing that people are like, well, what are the chances of getting an interview? And you can look at the numbers and see that. But then we get to what people can normally look at as the match rate. Okay. And now you're like, okay, these are the people that, these are the schools that I'm used to seeing. All right, UCSF, UNC, Medical University of South Carolina, Texas, Wisconsin, Purdue, Minnesota, Kentucky. All of those are big name schools, real high ranking with U.S. News and World Report, which unfortunately skews so far towards the research universities because they consider research to be a huge part of what it is to be a good pharmacy school and the name recognition. But what you might not realize is of those 34 at Cedarville, tiny school, 28 of them matched. That's 82%. That's crazy numbers, right? So, UNC's even crazier, 93. And 94 of the 101 that were active matched. Okay. And I think this unmatched is it's in the wrong spot. These are off by one, I guess. Yeah. So let me correct this because if I'm going to talk about it, I got to make sure that these are in the right place. So I knew it was a little bit goofy. Okay. Here we go. All right. Okay. So now it's correct. Okay. So, at UCSF, we had, 90 that made it past that first wave, and then 81 of 90, only 9 didn't match after getting an interview. At Cedarville, only 4 didn't match. Okay. And at UNC, 16 didn't match, but 94 out of 101 got an interview, and of those, 78 matched. Okay, so these are very, very high numbers. And what we're really looking at is, okay, of the schools that matched, this is the match rate. So this is where those big rankings come in. Okay, but I think personally that the better thing to look at is of the people that wanted a residency, what percent got it, okay? And you're going to see that this skews it even further towards the big name colleges. So UCSF, UNC, Minnesota, Texas, Wisconsin take up the top 5 spots. And I think because of that, I prefer to use this as a way to do this mathematically. So let's get to the cool part, which is, how do I know how hard a residency is to get into? Or how do I even know how hard a specialty is to get into? Okay. And so what you can do is you can put all 145 schools in order from 1 to 145. So UCSF gets a 1, Chapel Hill gets a 2, Duluth gets a 3, Austin gets a 4, and Wisconsin gets a 5. And you can use this in the reverse too. You're a residency site and you want to know, how good did we do? All right, well, we got somebody who came from a school where they are ranked number 2, and we got someone that was ranked number 7, and we got someone that was ranked number 16. And you'll see why those numbers are actually pretty important as we kind of go along. Okay. All right, well, let's look at some numbers and how we can use this mathematically. Okay, so this is a very, very prestigious hospital, PGY1. And all I did was, the only data I took was, where did the PGY1 students go to pharmacy school? Okay. And you look at them, and what I did, I put them in rank order. So the rank I'm using, again, is not the match rank because that doesn't take into account those that wanted it. I'm using this percent that wanted the match. So all of the students that wanted at some time to get into the residency, and whether they got interviewed or not, I think that's a much better indicator of where they rank. So that's where these ranks come from. And so UNC's number 2, Purdue's 12, Tennessee's 13, Kentucky 16, Duquesne 52, Colorado 59, St. Louis College of Pharmacy 61. And I don't know how recent statistics is for you, but you can use statistics with these ranks. And maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, but it's certainly pretty cool. Okay. So what I would do is, I'm looking at this hospital PGY1. I see that they have 10 residents. And what a lot of people think is, well, if it's just 1 out of 2 chance of getting a residency and there's 10 residents, well, my chances are pretty good. Well, sort of. What we're going to do is we're going to take the ranks and we're going to add them up, and they add up to 263. Okay. And then there are 10 residents. So the average rank at this site is a 26. But that's a little bit misleading, because what we're really saying is, if we look at the middle, and there's a reason I picked 10, when you look at one standard deviation has like, what is it, 68.2%. So what we're going to do is we're just going to say 7, okay? So the middle 7, and it doesn't exactly work right because we've got an even number, so we'll just take the middle 6 here, okay? The middle 6 should be 1 standard deviation away. So what is 1 standard deviation? Standard deviation, when you put all these numbers together, is 21. And so 26, we can do the math real quick. 26 plus 21, or 26 minus 21 would make 5. And 26 plus 21 would make 47. Okay. And so we expect the middle here, and we can use the middle 8 or middle 7, to be between 4 and 47. And that's exactly what or 5 and 47. And that's exactly what we find. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 of the residents are between schools that are ranked between 4 or 5 and 47. And if we go 1 further standard deviation away, okay, this obviously has to go to 1. We can't go all the way anywhere further. Then we would expect it would be 68. Okay. And we see that no student is more than 2 standard deviations away. Okay. And that's something that we would expect. Although, when you're doing the math with statistics, 5% should be there. But we've got such a small sample size with only 10 of them. So what we're saying is, if your school on my ranking list is below 61, you didn't have a chance. So schools that are ranked between 62 and 145 on my list, they didn't have a chance at this particular hospital PGY1. And what we can do is, to make the data even better, we could go back in years, but and I know that each year has gotten even harder. So the data gets a little bit fuzzier as you go back, and maybe shouldn't count quite as much. All right. But what this does is, it says every single residency that you're applying to, you can make this list and you can put the rankings up, and you can see that they only took students from the top 61 schools. But further, that they only took 1, 2, 3 students from schools outside of the top 16. So if you're 17 to 61, you don't have 10 spots. Well, and that's a little bit unfair. What we would do is the standard deviation. But if you're in kind of this range of the 50 and 60s, and remember, this isn't 50 out of 100. This is 50 out of 150. So Duquesne and Colorado and St. Louis Cop are still in the top 30 or 40%. They're not in the top half. But what we want to say is, if you are looking at this residency site, I would say that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 positions in that first standard deviation that are available for those top schools. Okay. And then there are going to be 3 positions that are maybe available for people that are outstanding at their school. And that's the thing that you got to take away, is that you should take a shot at these kind of elite places, but what you should not do is say, well, it costs more to do more than 4 applications. I'm not going to do that. It'll be fine. I'll just apply to the top 4 and I'll just get one of them, right? That's not what you want to do. Okay. But what you want to do is this. And then if you are below that 61, you got to really think, wow, this is really an elite one. And my school, for whatever reason, has not succeeded. And if you look at the geography here, you look at, okay, wherever this site is, North Carolina, Indiana, Tennessee, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, and are all east of the Mississippi, I think. Anyway, they're pretty much they're Midwest to East. Okay, they're not in the Northeast. They're not in Kentucky's kind of deep South. Nah, not really. Kind of depends on who you talk to. Most people say the Deep South starts at the Mason-Dixon line. Some say Mason-Dixon line, others say Richmond. But you're not going into Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, and all those. So there's a pretty geography here that you can look at and say, all right, they're kind of in this zone. In Colorado and St. Louis, these students were probably just absolutely outstanding at their own institutions. And these institutions are good, but what they've done is they've gone into, and this is what's so impressive, they've gone out of the geographic area, and they're from out of the geographic area, and they still got it. So is in some way this student a little bit better than the student that was in town? Maybe. I don't know. But I'm just saying that these students were probably really outstanding because their traditional match rank from last year wasn't as good. Although it's, top 30%, top 40%. Okay. But let's see some really cool differences in some of the sites. And I think this is going to be really neat. Okay. All right. So this was the one that was kind of our one that we used last time. But let's look at another hospital with PGY1 with 6 spots. And now you look at it and you're like, whew, man, that's even more competitive than that other one. You've got 2 that are from the same school, and, there's the branch campus. You've got 2 from Virginia. You've got 1 from Pennsylvania and 1 from South Dakota. Like, what is going on? And what probably is happening is here you have some outstanding students that were regional. You have a couple that are just out of the region. And then, Virginia, Pennsylvania are pretty close together. But this student to get this rotation, and these are the top residency sites, had to be amazing. Okay. So South Dakota State's 46 in the country. That's top 3rd. But to get out of your own region, and it's, I don't know, South Dakota, I guess it's Midwest. It's the western part of the Midwest. Some people kind of put them in the West. But this person was probably really, really outstanding. I'm sure they were all outstanding. But what you notice is that there are only 5 schools. There's only 4. Minnesota, VCU, Temple, and SDSU. Only 4 schools for 6 spots? That means 141 schools didn't get in, or if you want to look at it that way. Now, let's talk about the absolute most difficult ones to get into, okay? When you're looking at acute versus AmCare, and a lot of you are applying to both, and that causes its own problems, but this is really cool. This is an acute and an AmCare at the same site. But let's just see just how hard it is to get in the AmCare versus the acute. So the acute has taken people from UNC, Wisconsin, Kentucky, University of Illinois, Chicago, Florida, St. Louis COP, and Philadelphia College of Pharmacy. They haven't gone below a ranking of 67 on my rankings there. And so that means that you're basically removing 80 schools of pharmacy. And really, when we talk about the rank average, it's around 30. Okay, so if you're in the top 30 schools of pharmacy, you're still pretty good in the running there. But once you kind of get out of that in this 60s range, again, this St. Louis COP student was probably pretty outstanding. PCP student was pretty outstanding. To go out of region and then get this type of site. But man, look at this AmCare site. This is nuts. Only 4 spots, okay? They have a 2, a 7, and 2 16s, okay? That means that the average student came from one of the top 10 schools in the country. 135 schools were not even in that first, 10, okay? Okay. That is crazy hard to get into. So if this is your first choice, you really want to look at it and say, all right, well, where's my school? Okay, my school is 115. Ugh, all right, that's going to be a little bit tough, right? So what you want to do is, I hate to say realistic, because you see these students going out that are truly outstanding and truly a great match for the site. And what you really want to do is not rely on it. If you're going to apply to a ton of these type, then you need to increase your number of applications exponentially. But if you're going to start making it a little bit wider, then you're in better shape. But I want to show you another really cool one. Okay. This is also a top site. It just didn't fit. Look at this. One of the top schools in the country, and you're like, wait a minute. I don't understand. You were just telling me that out of 145 schools, that the mean was usually around 30, or the mean was 10 for that really hard one. You're telling me that a top site has a mean of 64, that the average school ranking was 64, or that seems crazy. Okay. Well, again, you've got to look into the data. You've got to look into the school. And these are the rankings in terms of, Ohio Northern 23rd, UMKC 39, Southern Cal 56, Northeastern 70, Mercer 90, Maryland 94, and University of Maryland Eastern Shore 124. You would say, I don't understand. How is it possible that a school that has what are not the best match rates can possibly match to one of the very top residencies in the country? Okay. Well, let's take this in two parts. First of all, this site only allows students from this school, and a handful of others to even do their longitudinal APPEs. So 1/2 of these sites were awarded to those students who completed their own longitudinal APPEs. And yeah, you say, well, that makes sense. I mean, somebody that's been there that long should be able to continue there. But on the other hand, you're like, well, you're at the same hospital. Doesn't seem like you're going to learn as much as if you went to a different one. Okay. So what is just phenomenal about this is that the other 4 spots went to such hugely different regions. I mean, it's almost like they said, we're going to pick one from the Northeast, one from the Deep South, one from the Southwest, or one from the West Coast, and one from the Midwest. These students were obviously exceptional, and they came from all over the country. And what you can ascertain about this site is that, wow, they are truly going to take the very best student from wherever as compared to the others. Okay. And you look at the standard deviation. Standard deviation is crazy. It's 36. So one standard deviation away means that we were in the 100th, so the top 100 schools out of 150. And 2 standard deviations is almost to the end at 136. But the range was from 23 to 124. And there is no one from the top 20 schools. How is that possible? How is this, how is that fair that the very best residencies, one of the very best residency sites, is awarding these entrances to students that aren't even in a top 20 school? And what this is telling me is that they truly are picking the top person. That you can come from a school that didn't have the best match rate, but if you are exceptional at that school, this site is going to recognize that. Okay. So what the takeaway from this whole session is telling you is that when you are applying and when you are looking at a site, okay, what you need to do is mathematically figure out, where are these students coming from? If you don't know where the current residents are from, you are absolutely applying blind. Okay. So when you're going to ASHP and starting to talk to these people, and from some of them you get a warm vibe, and from some of them you kind of get the cold shoulder, what they might be doing unintentionally, completely unintentionally, is just already knowing in their head, look, we're a place that is only going to take somebody from the top 20 schools. And it's not that we don't like you. It's not that you're not a nice person. It's that we had 300 applications for 4 positions last year. And it's just a really easy way for us to just make sure we get somebody good. We only have 4 people 4 residents and 1 RPD to go through these 300 applications. So one of the easiest things for us to do is just kind of make sure it's only from certain schools that we've worked with. Now, we're not allowed to tell you that because that would be discriminatory to say, we're only taking from certain schools. But what they're doing is they're saying, all right, well, we just want to ensure we get somebody really good. Easy way to do that. Let's just kind of stick to the top 20 and maybe anybody that we know that we've kind of worked with. And then, everybody that's got a president or whatever it is. So, if you're looking for the meritocracy, that is sites that are based on, your merit as an individual and you believe you're one of the best at your school, then this kind of site would be the one that you're looking for. On the other hand, if you are regionally close to one of these sites, then that would actually probably carry a little bit more weight. And what you'll also notice is that there's kind of a relationship with certain schools, that they picked a couple from the same school. And that you're going to see quite a bit. I saw one that had all Auburn students. I saw one that had all Michigan students. And not Michigan, but all from the state of Michigan. And what they're doing is they're trying to do what is the impossible, which is have 5 people who don't have extra time to do this to go through all of these applications and make a reasonably good decision. Okay. And what they're going to do is 2 things. One, they can go by rankings and just kind of know, all right, well, these are the schools that we've heard about and are really good, or we have a relationship with. And 2, who do we have a relationship with? And kind of put it that way. So, hopefully what you've taken away is that there is an evidence-based way and a mathematical way to choose the best places to apply to, and that you can create this list relatively easily. You just go in and get the ASHP match stats, take it from a PDF, put it into Excel, and then do a little bit of work with the sort and filter to get those rankings. But what you really want to do is apply to places that are in your wheelhouse, that are taking people from your school. And, when I'm, working on those phase 2, and, I helped 4 people match last year out of 20, and the chances of matching are like 3% or 4%. And to get such a high match rate I was just so proud of that. But what I was looking at with those 4 was, I'm like, how did you not match? And what they had done was they probably applied to a bunch of these kind of sites where you're just like, dude, we got 300 applications. We are exhausted already. We're at one of the best, which means we work a lot. And then we have to do this all on top. We want to be polite. We want to be nice. We want to email you back. We want to answer your questions. But there's no dedicated assistant for this. So hopefully this really gives you a true idea of how hard it is to get a residency, and that you should get that 1 out of 2 out of your head. That what you got to do is you got to go back to your rankings for your own school, and you got to look at the rankings at the people that are actually there, look at where they're from geographically. And those decisions are the things that are going to help you match more than anything else. Yeah, your GPA is going to matter. Yeah, that you were president's going to matter. And all those things are going to matter as we refine this. But when you're taking the big list down, man, you gotta look at who's there. Because the one thing they're not going to do is reduce their quality this year, because there's going to be even more applicants. So I would say, something like this one is probably going to go up to 50. And this one's going to probably go up to 40. And this is going to go up to 50. And this might even be just the top 10 when we look at it, in hindsight. So, okay, I do mention this site all the time. But Please, please let me help you with your letter of intent. I know the biggest barrier to you doing this is not necessarily the $95. What it is like, look, man, I paid $250,000 to go to school. These guys are the ones that should be helping me do this. And I got to tell you that, yeah, maybe, I get that. But that's just not the case at some places. And that you need to take this in your own hands. Yeah, I could say, well, I'm paying for my kids to learn soccer from this group, and that group should teach them how to kick it really hard, or that group should teach them how to dribble the ball. But what really happens is, well, I'm just going to go get them extra help outside of it. I'm going to get them some one-on-one attention. And that's what this is. Look, in school, you paid to, be one of 100 or whatever it is. I'll give you 100% of my attention while I'm working on that letter. And I got to tell you, as you're writing this letter, you're going to start looking at it and like, man, I think I'm kind of applying to some of the wrong places. And I see that over and over again. But then I also get the affirmation too, where people are like, this is right. This feels right. This really is a match.